Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, Senior Editor for Gold Derby. Emily Mortimer was nominated for a BAFTA for The Pursuit of Love, streaming now on Amazon Prime. It's set in Europe before World War II and tells the story of a charismatic and fearless woman named Linda Radlett, played by Lily James, and her cousin Fanny Logan, played by Emily Beecham. Emily, this is adapted from the book of the same name by Nancy Mitford. What connected you initially to this story and inspired you to tell it now?
I had always loved the book. It's kind of a national treasure, the book in England where I'm from. And I'd read it first when I was a young person in my late teens and had remembered loving it. And then when I was approached and asked to adapt it, I knew I wanted to read it again and was excited to do so. But a little bit of me was thinking, does the world really need another costume drama in a big country house in the, English countryside somewhere? And I reread it and I just was so excited by the novel in a way that I had remembered, but I hadn't remembered exactly why. And it felt incredibly fresh to me and incredibly relevant. And I felt sort of forgiven reading it. I can't really put it in any more of a vague and emotional way than that. But I feel like Nancy's sensibility is extremely unjudgmental, extremely unsanctimonious. She has an allergy to kind of earnestness, an allergy to moral certitude, which I think we suffer from in this moment a lot. And she was writing at a time that was kind of similar to ours in the sense that it was, hopefully not the lead up to the Third World War, but she was writing she was writing about the run up to the Second World War, and she wrote it in 1945, but she was writing at a time when Europe was completely polarized, much like how we experience the world, and divided into people who are either fascists or communists. And there was so much to learn from her exploration of that moment, but she does it in such a kind of sideways way. So she does it through the friendship of these two women and the love life in particular of one woman. And the central character, Linda, goes from her love life acts as a sort of satire on the politics of the time. So she goes from a fascist banker to a communist activist and then a French duke, but she finds that the fascist banker and the communist activist are both as sort of self-involved and sort of awful as each other. And there was, and as I said, the book is completely lacking in earnestness and yet somehow dealing with very serious and important issues in a way that feels so light of touch and then at times just devastating. And another thing that she deals with in a way that I was really responded to was the whole issue of motherhood, which I think has been a very kind of, up until now, it's been a sort of taboo to explore motherhood in any kind of an honest way. I think we saw with Maggie Gyllenhaal's recent movie, The Lost Daughter, suddenly finally someone is talking about like what it might be to not be a perfect mother, and up until this moment, if you were an imperfect mother on our screens or you couldn't be a kind of likable person at the same time as an imperfect mother, whereas the world as we know has been littered with imperfect fathers since time began, and they've always been given a sort of free pass, and my show is littered with terrible mothers who you also kind of like, and you don't necessarily forgive, but you appreciate, and I was very interested in that part of it too.
And it's beautifully shot, and it seems ambitious. It looks, I'm curious about the landscape where the filming took place, those wonderful outdoor shots, and even the set of the home, which is just sort of lavish and beautiful to look at.
Yeah, well, thank you. I knew that if I was to make this this thing on television and present it to people, the experience I was certain that the experience of watching it had to be as kind of exciting and delicious as the experience of reading the book is. And I knew also that I wanted to, I had never directed anything before, and suddenly I was directing 3 hours of television in the beginning of the pandemic in England. It it was in June of 2020 that we shot it, and we were literally the first thing back. So I was a complete newbie at the helm of this 3 hours of television, and in a pandemic, and the first show back that anyone had ever done in England anyway. And so it was all so new, but I guess I had been on enough sets in my life as an actor, and seen enough people doing it, and seen enough movies, and knew what I loved. And I was very sure that what I wanted to do was combine a kind of formality and a rigidity and a sort of storybook quality, because the novel is a memoir, so it does act a little bit like a sort of going back in time and looking through the leaves of a book. And I actually used Fanny's diary, which becomes a kind of character in the movie, in the TV show, as an important prop. And so that I wanted sometimes to feel like you're in the pages of her diary, of her memories, of her childhood, and of her life with this exciting best friend of hers. And so some things are very formal and composed and like photographs, but then also there's this female friendship at the heart of it that is very kind of messy and passionate and exciting and feminine and free. And so I wanted those spaces and those moments between the two women to be really like handheld and messy and all over everywhere, and to just feel like you were in that kind of unburdened space that you can be in when you're with a best friend, and you're just kind of lying around in bed talking about life.
I love that hunting scene where they're all just dressed to the nines and riding horses, and there's dogs running all over. I'm just curious what it's like filming something like that where everyone looks so nice, but it's dirty. Is that just a disaster? If someone gets messy, like how do you reshoot it? I'm curious about some of those scenes and what the technicality of all of that is.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, it was just, first of all, it was always raining, which it always is in England. So it's like add into like the millions of horses and children and dogs and actors who, some of them had never been on a horse before, suddenly having to be on a horse and pretend to be hunting. And then it's pissing with rain. And yeah, it was chaos, but it was kind of partly because I think we were just all so happy to be there. And I think there was a kind of an energy that imbued the entire experience, because most everybody there, I mean, all of us, none of us had expected to be working. And so everybody, from the biggest star, from Andrew Scott and Lily James and Dominic West, to all the musicians, to the dancers, to everybody, to the runners, to everybody, had been literally just sitting in their homes, some of them on their own, in their own apartments, not with a single soul, for the months just up until when we started shooting. And so it just felt so great just to be in each other's company and to be working and to be allowed to be together. I remember Andrew at one moment when we were doing one of the ball scenes, and him coming up to me and saying, "I can't believe I'm at a party." I was like, I know, if only it was real champagne. But it did feel, I've never felt more lucky to be working. And I think everybody felt that way. And I tried to kind of bottle that, because the show had to have a kind of furious energy about it if it was to kind of sort of be pulled off. So that really helped us, even in those dreadful moments where the rain was pouring down and nobody knew what they were doing, and they were sitting on dangerous horses riding through the English countryside.
And you mentioned Dominic West, who plays Uncle Matthew, Fanny's uncle, and it's Linda's father. Yeah. And he's sort of abusive, you could say. There's also a ridiculousness about him. This is a period drama, but it's also very funny. So I'm curious how you walk that line of someone, a character like that, who does make us laugh, but there is a brutality to him as well.
Yeah, well, it was very important that he was brutal, because part of the aim with the thing is to show that these people may be privileged in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that their life hasn't been a total sort of disaster in other ways. Like one of the earliest lines in the novel, which I made sure to keep in the voiceover, was, had we been poor, our father would have no doubt been sent to prison for beating us and refusing to educate us. And he really is that monstrous. He beats his children. He refuses to educate his daughters. He keeps them kind of locked up in this kind of house. It's like prison, really. And yet there's a side to him that is charming and lovable, and his children do love him in a way. And he has to be funny. And that was a really important balance that I do, as I said, going back to what I was saying at the beginning, I feel like what is important about Nancy's writing is, first of all, it's just heavenly entertaining, but also her lack of judgment of character. And where you paint a picture of a man who is brutal and awful and terrifying, but you make sure that he's got a side where you kind of love him, and you never come down on either side. And that was really important to me, to preserve that tonally, like the danger of it mixed with the humor of it. And it meant casting actors basically that know how to do that tone, because it was interesting, even in the auditions, you would have an actor that would come in and read a scene in a very overly serious way, and that wouldn't work. And then you'd have an actor that would come in and read a scene in an overly comic way, and that wouldn't work. And it's very few people that can really get that tone, that walk that tightrope between both. And it's so great when it works, and it's such a sort of challenge tonally to make it work. And hopefully we pulled it off a bit. I'm sure we, not always, but that was the aim constantly, in everything, in every moment, not just in the performance, but in the way that it was shot, in the look of the thing, in the costumes, and the everything, to just toe that tonal line, and keep the ball in the air in that way, so you don't go down on one side or the other.
Well, Emily Mortimer, congratulations on directing this project. It's beautiful. And thank you for speaking with Gold Derby today about The Pursuit of Love on Amazon Prime. And best of luck at the Emmys this year.
Thank you for having me.